Change of scenery, the big smoke. Well, a park in the big smoke. Now, I want to look at the digital, talk about the digital revolution. Is it the liberating force everybody claims it is? Or is it being used as a force to enslave us? Now, as I've said before, a revolution in the way people make their living is the harbinger to major political change, and we saw that in the late 18th century and the early 19th century, as we saw the consequences of the Industrial Revolution. We now have a digital revolution, and the reason you can see this is because of that digital revolution. Now, technology, in essence, is neither good or bad. It's who owns the technology and how that technology is implemented and the reason it's implemented. It's no accident that 1984, which was written by George Orwell in the 1930s, highlighted the dangers of the centralisation of technology. At the beginning of the digital revolution in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, the digital revolution was expected to liberate us from centralised technology, from the fact that the means of communication were controlled by a small number of people who'd continue to disseminate the same ideas. At the same time, the digital revolution was supposed to liberate us from the everyday angst of everyday work. So what's come to pass 30 years later, actually 35 years later? Has the digital revolution been the liberating force it was supposed to be? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no. Not because of the technology. The technology itself could be liberating, but in terms of who owns that technology, who is able to use that technology and for what reasons it's used. For example, in China, facial recognition has become a very important mechanism via which the authorities track people's movements. In the West, the ownership of the major means of communication on the World Wide Web by private individuals has created a new form of censorship which only allows certain ideas to flourish. It's not a matter of access, it's a matter of dissemination. When we reach the stage where your information is the product, you begin to worry. Now, almost every time I walk into a bank, yes, I still walk into banks, I see some poor person arguing with one of the customer service relations experts about somebody making unauthorised transactions on their accounts. Every time you walk into a bank, people are herded towards machines where they're expected to self-service. Not for a discount, but just to self-service to maximise the profits of that particular financial institution's shareholders. You walk into a supermarket and again you're expected to self-service in an increasing number of situations. Not because you receive a discount for self-servicing, because but because that self-servicing actually improves the bottom line of that particular corporation. So if we thought that the digital revolution was going to be a liberating force, we need to think again. Because while we have the centralised ownership of the mechanisms by which the digital revolution is able to provide services, then what we will see is the way that particular entity is run and manipulated to increase profitability for the company. And we see that with the advertising, and our advertising is tailored to individuals in the digital revolution. That's the call to prayer for all you religious people. You can hear in the background from St. Patrick's. So, is it a liberating force? Well, I don't believe it is. Has it improved our work environment? Well, although we are able to communicate more rapidly, the fact is it hasn't actually improved the work environment. We've now reached the ridiculous situation in this country where legislation will be passed through Parliament to give workers the right not to be digitally connected to their employer during periods they are not working. We have a competition here between a helicopter above us and the church behind us. This is what happens when you go to the big smoke. It's not like that tranquil place where we normally talk about this. So getting back to this so-called digital revolution in the workplace. What the digital revolution in the workplace is basically made as slaves. Slaves in terms of monitoring the amount of work we do and the type of work we do, and slaves in terms of the way our time is controlled. Now during the Industrial Revolution in the 1830s and the 1840s, in the 19th century, we saw the feudal system, which was common in Great Britain, break down, but didn't actually improve the lives of the serfs, because most of them were forced through starvation and inability to earn a living because of these major changes to move to the cities to be basically workplace slaves for entrepreneurs who are using the new technology to enrich themselves and their financial backers. Now, nothing has changed in the 21st century as we go through the digital revolution, because what we see today is the same philosophy. Although human beings don't have to work 18 hours a day in substandard conditions, the fact is that many people find themselves in situations which are totally intolerable in the workplace because of their way their time is managed. Not just in the workplace, but outside the workplace, where they're expected to respond instantaneously to emails. I'll give you a simple example. A few years ago, I got a call from a reporter who was very angry that I hadn't answered her emails. And I said, well, I only check my emails on Tuesday, and then if there's any interesting ones, I will respond to them. And she said, you can't do that. And I said, of course I can. They're my emails. It's up to me to decide what I respond to and what I don't respond to. So what we're seeing is, although we have information at our fingertips, we have little capacity to be able to filter that information. And we've seen the growth on the World Wide Web of ideas which would have made people in the 15th and the 16th century blush in terms of the stupidity, because we've now reached a situation in 21st century society where it's not about facts, it's about belief systems. And that's what the world was based on before the Enlightenment, especially in the European context. It was based on belief systems. Those bells you heard pealing in the background was based on a belief system. The helicopter you heard flying ahead is based on scientific principles. But in the 21st century, because of the manipulation of the digital media by the forces that own it, what we see now is a growing movement which has no interest in its history. It has no interest in facts. It has no interest in science. And it's become so self-obsessed and self-absorbed that the damage to the individual and the community has increased dramatically. It's no accident that in a highly digitalised society with a digitalised younger population who have known nothing else, that the rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, angst have never been higher in our society. So if the digital revolution was supposed to liberate us and free us from the everyday reality, the fact is it hasn't. It has made things much more difficult for people. So, is it the fault of the technology? Obviously it's not the fault of the technology. The technology is there, it can be used in one way or another. It's the same we see in every aspect of human existence. How technology is perverted to centralised power and centralised wealth. Look at the sophistication of the technology which is being used in the Gaza Strip against 2.1 million. We are seeing the digitalisation of war. The fact that somebody in some ill-lit room 10,000 kilometres away can manipulate a technological innovation to kill people 10,000 kilometres away shows us how far we've got with the digital revolution. It's no accident that drones are becoming the weapon of choice for assassination, for destruction, whether it's Gaza or the Ukraine or any other part of the world. So is it the fault of the digital revolution? Well, it's no accident to say the gains that were made by people during the Industrial Revolution, after the Industrial Revolution, were made by struggle. And anybody who looks at the history post the Industrial Revolution, the history of working people, the history of the population at large, every gain they made was through struggle. The landscape is littered with the bodies of those who died in those struggles. And what we've forgotten with the digital revolution is that what is required is struggle to ensure that things change. Even St. Patrick's there agrees with me. They're ringing the bells because they know that it's struggle. What got the Catholic Church started? Struggle. What gets any social movement moving? Struggle. But unfortunately with this digital revolution, We have become so self-absorbed in the technology that we have forgotten that lesson. And that's why we find ourselves going backwards as a society. That's why there's increased centralisation of power through the manipulation of the digital revolution. That's why there's a lack of debate. Although there's a massive amount of information, there is a lack of debate about alternatives. That's why we find ourselves in a situation where belief systems, as we heard with the pealing bells, are more important than the helicopter overhead, which is based on scientific principles. It doesn't matter how much you want to levitate that helicopter through a belief system, unless you have the right technology, it'll never be able to fly. And it's the same with social change and political change. Social change and political change, irrespective of the technological innovation and the effect that technological innovation has on the population as a whole, is dependent on people coming together and being involved in struggle. It's dependent on people combining, because it's that combination of people which changes reality. Without people coming together, there is no change in reality. What we see is a shrinking possibilities, because we are hemmed in by technological innovations which are used to control us. So think about it. The digital revolution, it's a revolution in how people earn their income. What are the things that we should be struggling for? A universal basic income, direct democratic methods of making decisions, decentralisation of energy sources, decentralisation of the digital economy, the inclusion of rights within our constitutional framework. All ideas which have been struggled for in the past. But with the 21st century, it's becoming much more important that we join that struggle. Because with an increase in population growth, limited or finite resources, increasing greenhouse emissions due to technology, the fossil fuel industry, and the domination of the world economy by an economic system based on the creation of ever-increasing profits, irrespective of the human and social costs. Unless we are willing to join the struggle to break down their monopoly and power, nothing will change. And that's why I encourage you to join public interest before corporate interest. You can do it online, pibci.net. If you know you can't do it online, you can always leave a message on 0439 395 489. Join the struggle to decentralise, join the struggle to share wealth, join the struggle to ensure that power is shared.